My name is Kang Min Jae, known as the Reaper. I control men and love is for weak people, not for mafia boss like me.
Nobody spoke when Kang Min Jae entered a room. Not because he demanded silence, but because silence followed him like a shadow. In Seoul's underworld, they called him the Reaper. A man who ruled with one glance. A man who had buried his heart the same night he learned to kill. The Korean mafia boss believed one truth. Love was a weakness he could never afford. Until one morning at 6:47 a.m. His new housekeeper walked into his kitchen. Amara. Dark skin glowing against the cold white marble of his penthouse. Natural hair pulled back. No fear in her eyes. Humming. Actually humming. Like she didn't know who he was. Or worse, like she knew exactly who he was and didn't care. She turned. Saw him standing in the doorway. And smiled. Not the nervous smile of someone trying to survive. Not the calculated smile of someone playing games. Just, smiled. Warm. Real. Human. Like he was worth smiling at. The room froze. His men stopped breathing. Everyone knew what happened to people who got too comfortable around Kang Min Jae. But Amara just went back to making coffee. Like she hadn't just done the most dangerous thing anyone had done in his presence in 10 years. And Min Jae. In that moment, the man who felt nothing felt his world crack wide open. Because the most dangerous thing isn't a man with a gun, it's a man who has forgotten how to feel, suddenly forced to remember. The doors locked shut. The choice was made. What? Amara didn't know. She had just become the only weakness in a man surrounded by enemies who were always watching. Would he break the ironclad rules that kept him alive, or would he destroy the only woman who had ever looked at him with humanity? Stay with us, because the smile he couldn't forget is about to ignite a war Seoul will never forget. Before we see his first move, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. We want to hear from our global family. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We love you all. Now, back to the story. Amara blinked. Good morning, she said gently. Her accent carried traces of West Africa softened by years abroad. Would you like coffee? Min Jae did not respond immediately. His dark eyes studied her face the way he would study a contract, searching for hidden clauses. Fear. Greed. Strategy. He found none. Do you know who I am? He asked finally, voice low and calm. The question wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Amara tilted her head slightly. You're Mr. Kang. I work in your home. A few guards shifted uncomfortably. That's all, he pressed. She hesitated. Not from fear, but from consideration. You seem like a man who carries a lot. The silence cracked. No one spoke to him that way. Ever. Min Jae stepped fully into the kitchen now, the quiet alpha presence filling the space. People who carry a lot, he said evenly, are not people you smile at. Maybe they're the ones who need it most, she replied. One of the guards inhaled sharply. Min Jae dismissed them with a slight motion of his fingers. They retreated, confused. When the doors slid shut, leaving only the two of them and the rising scent of coffee, something unfamiliar passed between them. Not attraction. Not yet. Recognition. He moved closer, stopping just short of invading her space. Who hired you? Your operations manager, she answered. I applied through an agency. And you weren't warned? I was warned, she said honestly. About your rules. About the silence. About the reputation. And that didn't frighten you? She met his eyes fully now. Respect and fear aren't the same thing. He stared at her for a long second. Then, unexpectedly, he took the cup she had prepared. It was the first time in years that anyone had handed him something without shaking. He tasted it. Perfect. You'll work mornings, he said quietly. And evenings. That was not what the contract stated. She nodded anyway. Yes, Mr. Kang. As she turned to leave, he added, Amara. She paused. Don't hum. It wasn't a threat. It sounded almost strained. She gave a small nod and walked out. The moment the doors closed, his expression hardened again. But something inside him had shifted. Upstairs, alone in his office overlooking the Han River, Min-jae loosened his tie slightly. His reflection stared back from the glass, sharp, composed, untouchable. He hadn't allowed himself to think about softness in years. The last woman who smiled at him without calculation had nearly destroyed him. 5 years earlier, before he became the undisputed Korean Mafia boss of Seoul's underground network, there had been someone else. Ji-yoon. Elegant. Intelligent. Ambitious. She loved his power. Until she realized power came with enemies. When a rival faction targeted him, she panicked. Leaked confidential information in exchange for protection. 2 of his closest men died because of that leak. He survived. But something inside him did not. Love had nearly cost him his empire. So he built rules instead. No emotional entanglements. No weakness. No woman close enough to matter. And yet. That smile in the kitchen replayed in his mind. Unforced. Unimpressed. Unaware of how dangerous it was. Downstairs, Amara folded linen in the laundry room, unaware that 3 separate security cameras now tracked her movements more closely than before. She had taken this job because Seoul was expensive and her scholarship stipend barely covered tuition. Nursing school required long hours, and this position paid well, too well. She had noticed the tension in the house from day one. Men who never laughed. Staff who avoided eye contact. A man who moved like a storm contained inside a tailored suit. But she had also noticed something else. Loneliness. It clung to Kang Min-jae more heavily than fear did. That morning, when she smiled, she hadn't planned to. She just saw exhaustion in his eyes. And something in her refused to treat another human being like a myth. Later that evening, a black sedan pulled into the underground garage. Min-jae returned from a meeting, expression unreadable. As he entered the living area, voices drifted from the hallway. 2 of his men speaking in low tones. She doesn't fit here. Too comfortable. A risk. Min-jae stepped into view. The conversation stopped instantly. Is there a problem? He asked calmly. No, sir. His gaze lingered. If there is a problem, he continued, you bring it to me. Yes, sir. They bowed slightly and walked away. He knew what they were thinking. A black housekeeper in the private space of Korea's most feared mafia boss would attract attention. Attention invited questions. Questions invited enemies. Upstairs, he found Amara in the study organizing files. She looked up. This time, she did not smile. He noticed. Why did you stop humming? He asked. You told me to. And you always follow instructions. In someone else's home. Yes. A flicker of something passed through his eyes. Good. She gathered the last file and stepped aside. As she moved past him, he caught the faint scent of vanilla. Soft. Human. Dangerous. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. We know about the new girl. His expression darkened instantly. He typed back only one word. Explain. A photo arrived seconds later. A grainy image of Amara entering the penthouse that morning. Followed by another message. Everyone has a weakness, Reaper. The air in the room shifted from quiet tension to controlled fury. Amara noticed the change immediately. Mr. Kang. He locked his phone screen slowly. From this moment forward, he said evenly, you do not leave this building without permission. Her brows knit. Is something wrong? Yes. He stepped closer, voice lowering. You smiled at the wrong man. Outside, somewhere in the city, someone had just declared war, not for territory, not for money. but for the first visible crack in Kang Min-jae's armor. And for the first time in years, the Korean Mafia boss felt something far more dangerous than anger. Fear. Not for himself. For her. Amara stared at him, trying to understand what he wasn't saying. You smiled at the wrong man. The words didn't sound romantic. They sounded like a warning. Are you saying I'm in danger? She asked carefully. Min-jae didn't answer immediately. He walked past her, pressed a code into the security panel, and the penthouse shifted into lockdown mode. Reinforced glass. Restricted elevator access. Silent alarms activated. Only then did he look at her again. Yes. The simplicity of it made her stomach tighten. She had grown up around instability. Lagos traffic that swallowed hours. Bills that arrived before salaries. A father who worked himself into exhaustion. She wasn't fragile. But this was different. This was calculated danger. Because I work here, she asked. Because someone thinks you matter, he replied. The weight of that statement settled between them. Someone thinks you matter. In the criminal underworld, that wasn't flattering. It was fatal. She swallowed. Then fire me. The response caught him off guard. You believe leaving will protect you? It removes me from your world. A faint, humorless smile touched his lips. No one leaves my world once they've been seen. The honesty in his tone chilled her more than any threat could. He walked toward the bar, poured himself water, never alcohol during conflict, and continued speaking without looking at her. My enemies are watching. They test. They provoke. They look for hesitation. And they think I'm hesitation, she asked quietly. He finally met her eyes. They think you are leverage. Silence stretched between them again, but this time it wasn't suffocating. It was heavy with understanding. You could prove them wrong, she said. How? Treat me like I don't matter. His jaw tightened. He had spent years mastering emotional detachment. It was discipline. Strategy. Survival. But something about dismissing her felt incorrect. You don't understand the kind of men I deal with, he said. Then help me understand. The request wasn't dramatic. It wasn't pleading. It was steady. That steadiness unsettled him more than fear would have. He stepped closer, close enough for her to see the faint scar near his collarbone. A reminder from a knife that had nearly ended him years ago. 5 years ago, he began, voice low, someone I trusted believed she could negotiate with my enemies. Amara didn't interrupt. She thought she could control the outcome. She was wrong. Information was exchanged. 2 of my men died. His expression didn't change as he said it. But his eyes did. That was the last time I allowed emotion to interfere with judgment. And you think I'm emotion? She asked softly. I think you are becoming distraction. The word landed heavier than he intended. Amara inhaled slowly. I didn't apply for this job to become anyone's distraction. I needed work. I needed stability while I finished nursing school. That's all. Nursing school. The detail lingered. You want to be a nurse? He asked. I am one, she corrected gently. In training. He studied her differently now. Not as a threat. Not as leverage. But as something dangerously real. Why here? He pressed. Of all places in Seoul. Because your agency pays 3 times the market rate, she answered honestly. And because no one else was willing to sponsor flexible hours. Money. Practicality. No hidden ambition. It almost frustrated him. You're not afraid? He asked again. She held his gaze. I am. But fear doesn't mean I stop being myself. The words echoed in his mind long after she excused herself to finish organizing the study. Later that night, his security chief entered his office. We traced the message, the man said. It's from the Daehoon faction. Min-jae's expression hardened instantly. Rivals. Ruthless. Opportunistic. They've been looking for an entry point for months, the chief continued. This girl. Amara, Min-jae corrected sharply. The chief blinked. Yes. Her. They see opportunity. Min-jae leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Increase surveillance. Quietly. Yes, sir. And if they get close? His eyes turned cold again. They won't. After the chief left, Min-jae remained seated in darkness, the city lights flickering beyond the glass. He had built an empire on calculated decisions. Protect assets. Eliminate threats. Maintain control. Simple. So why was this different? Downstairs, Amara sat on her bed in the staff quarters, phone pressed to her ear. Yes, Mama, I'm fine, she whispered. The job is intense. Her mother's voice crackled through the line, full of warmth and worry. You always choose the hardest paths, Amara. She smiled faintly. Maybe. But hard doesn't mean wrong. After she hung up, she stared at the ceiling. She had sensed the darkness around Min-jae from the first day. But she had also sensed something else. Restraint. He could have humiliated her that morning. Fired her. Scared her into obedience. He hadn't. Instead, he had warned her. Protected her. In his own rigid way. The next morning, tension hung thicker than usual. Guards rotated shifts more aggressively. Vehicles circled the block twice before parking. Min-jae entered the kitchen again at precisely 6:47 a.m. This time, Amara didn't hum. She simply prepared his coffee. He watched her in silence. Why did you really smile? He asked suddenly. She didn't turn. Because you looked lonely. The answer hit harder than any accusation. I am not lonely, he said automatically. Everyone is, she replied softly. He stepped closer. You speak as if you know me. I don't, she admitted. But I know what isolation looks like. And what makes you think you understand isolation? She finally turned, meeting his gaze fully. Moving to a country where you don't look like anyone else. Working twice as hard to be seen as equal. Smiling when people assume you don't belong. The air shifted again. Not hostile. Vulnerable. For you, she continued carefully, power isolates. For me, difference isolates. It's not the same. But it feels similar. Min-jae didn't respond. Because for the first time in years, someone wasn't speaking to the Reaper. They were speaking to the man underneath. Before he could say anything more, one of his guards rushed in. Sir. The single word carried urgency. What is it? Min-jae asked sharply. There's been movement. Daehoon vehicles spotted 2 blocks away. Amara's heart skipped. Min-jae's entire demeanor transformed in an instant, calm replaced by lethal precision. Lock the lower levels. No one in or out. Yes, sir. The guard hesitated, glancing briefly at Amara. Min-jae followed the look. Then he made a decision that surprised even himself. Bring her upstairs. Amara's eyes widened. I can stay out of the way. No, he said firmly. This wasn't about proximity anymore. It was about protection. As they moved toward the secured elevator, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Not police. Private signals. Warning signals. Inside the elevator, the confined space made the tension undeniable. Mr. Kong, Min-jae, she corrected softly, is this because of me? He didn't deny it. Yes. The honesty struck her harder than any lie would have. The elevator doors opened into his private floor. Bulletproof glass. Reinforced walls. A room built for siege. You should hate me, she whispered. He turned to face her fully. I don't. The admission lingered between them, fragile and dangerous. Below them, engines roared. Men shouted. The first shot echoed faintly through the reinforced structure. War had arrived at his doorstep. And in that moment, Kang Min-jae understood something with terrifying clarity. His enemies weren't attacking his empire. They were testing his heart. And for the first time in 5 years. He wasn't sure which one he was more afraid of losing. The second shot came louder. Even through reinforced glass, the vibration traveled up the steel structure of the penthouse. Amara flinched. Min-jae didn't. He was already moving. He pressed a concealed panel on the wall. Security feeds lit up across the room, multiple camera angles showing black SUVs positioned at the perimeter gate below. Daehoon insignia. Calculated. Provocative. They won't breach, he said calmly, though his jaw was tight. This is intimidation. For me? Amara asked quietly. For reaction, he corrected. On one of the screens, a rival lieutenant stepped out of a vehicle slowly, deliberately visible to the cameras. A message without words. We see her. Min-jae picked up his phone and dialed a number he rarely used directly. The line connected on the first ring. You're bold, Min-jae said evenly. A chuckle answered him. You've been quiet lately, Reaper. We wondered if you were distracted. His gaze flicked briefly toward Amara. You came to my property to test that theory? We came to observe, the rival replied smoothly. Interesting choice of staff. Min-jae's voice turned ice cold. Leave. Or what? You'll start a war over a housekeeper. Silence. The rival continued, amused. Careful. You taught us that emotion is weakness. The line went dead. Amara had heard enough to understand. They're trying to provoke you, she said softly. Yes. And if you react? They escalate. And if you don't? They escalate differently. There was no safe option. His phone buzzed again, this time from his security chief downstairs. They're retreating, the message read. No engagement. Min-jae exhaled slowly. Not relief. Assessment. They wanted confirmation, he murmured. Of what? Amara asked. That you matter. The weight of those words settled heavily between them. She crossed her arms instinctively, steadying herself. Then make me not matter. He looked at her sharply. You think I can switch perception like that? You've built an empire, she replied. You control narratives. He stepped closer. You don't understand how men like them think. Then explain it to me. His eyes darkened. They believe attachment creates leverage. If they believe you affect my decisions, they will exploit that. And do I? She asked quietly. The question was direct. Dangerous. He held her gaze for a long moment. Yes. The honesty stunned her. Not because it sounded romantic. But because it sounded real. Before she could respond, another message flashed across the security monitor. A still image captured from a street camera 2 blocks away. Amara leaving a convenience store 3 nights ago. Alone. Time-stamped. Tracked. They've been watching you longer than I realized, Min-jae said, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. A chill ran down her spine. I didn't notice. You weren't supposed to. He stepped toward the control panel again. From now on, you do not leave with escorts only, he said firmly. You leave with me. Her eyes widened. That's worse. It's controlled, he countered. Min-jae, she said carefully, using his name for the first time without hesitation. If I become visible beside you, that confirms everything they suspect. The sound of his name in her voice did something unsettling to him. It softened the sharp edges of the room. You are already visible, he replied quietly. Silence stretched between them again, but this time it wasn't about power. It was about proximity. The tension was different now. Not fear. Something closer to inevitability. Downstairs, engines roared again as the Daehoon vehicles pulled away. A performance completed. A warning delivered. Min Jae turned off the monitors. They won't strike immediately, he said. They'll wait. For what? For me to choose. She frowned slightly. Choose what? Whether you're an employee. His voice lowered. Or something else. The words hung between them. She felt the shift. So did he. And that terrified him more than gunfire ever could. He stepped back, putting physical distance between them. This changes nothing, he said firmly, almost to himself. I agree, she replied gently. But neither of them believed it. That evening, the penthouse felt different. Tighter. Charged. Amara prepared dinner in the kitchen while security rotated in doubled shifts. Min Jae stood at the window overlooking the city, hands in his pockets. You should consider resigning, he said without turning. She paused mid-motion. If I leave now, she said slowly, it confirms weakness. His jaw tightened. You think like a strategist. I think like someone who refuses to run. He turned then. You don't owe me loyalty. I'm not offering loyalty, she replied. I'm offering practicality. He studied her carefully. You are aware, he said quietly, that staying here could cost you more than a job. I am. And you're still choosing to stay? She set the knife down deliberately. Yes. The simplicity of her answer unsettled him deeply. Why? He asked. She met his eyes without hesitation. Because I don't believe you're the monster everyone pretends you are. That struck harder than accusation. You don't know what I've done, he said evenly. No, she admitted. But I know what you haven't done. He stiffened slightly. You haven't hurt me. You haven't humiliated me. You haven't used fear to control me. She stepped closer. That matters. For a moment, the distance between them felt electric. He could see the steady rise and fall of her breathing. She could see the faint scar near his jawline. Don't mistake restraint for goodness, he warned. I won't, she said softly. Then, before either of them could overthink it, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the entire penthouse went dark. Backup generators kicked in seconds later, but the interruption was enough. Min Jae's instincts snapped into place. Stay behind me, he ordered sharply. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Not his men. Too fast. Too uncoordinated. The security breach alarm triggered. Daehoon hadn't been testing. They had been distracting. A gunshot shattered the glass panel near the stairwell. Chaos erupted below. Min Jae pulled a firearm from the concealed drawer near the wall. Amara's heart pounded violently. This isn't intimidation, she whispered. No, he said coldly. This is escalation. He handed her something small and metallic. A panic transmitter, he said. If we get separated, press it. Her fingers trembled slightly as she took it. I'm not leaving you, she said instinctively. His eyes flashed. That is not your decision. More shouting echoed from downstairs. Footsteps closer now. Min Jae stepped toward the doorway, posture lethal. And for the first time since she met him, Amara saw not loneliness. Not restraint. But the full, terrifying force of the Korean Mafia boss they called the Reaper. He glanced back at her briefly. If they touch you, he said quietly, I will burn their entire operation to the ground. The promise wasn't emotional. It was factual. The hallway door burst open. And the war that had been circling them finally stepped inside. The first man through the door didn't expect resistance from above. That was his mistake. Min Jae moved before the intruder's second step landed. One precise shot. Clean. Controlled. The man dropped. Two more followed behind him, shouting into earpieces, weapons raised, but they hadn't anticipated the layout of the private floor. They hadn't anticipated that Kang Min Jae never relied solely on guards. He relied on preparation. The lights flickered again as emergency red strips activated along the floor. The hallway turned into a corridor of shadows. "Stay back," Min-jae ordered without looking at her. But Amara wasn't frozen. She wasn't trained for this, but she was trained for crisis. When one of Min-jae's guards stumbled into the room bleeding from his shoulder, she reacted on instinct. "Put him down," she commanded, voice firm. The guard obeyed without thinking. Min-jae fired again down the hallway, forcing the remaining intruders into retreat. The sound of boots scrambling echoed as Dae-hoon realized they had miscalculated. Amara ripped fabric from a curtain, applying pressure to the guard's wound. "Hold still," she said calmly. Blood didn't scare her. Chaos didn't paralyze her. Min-jae noticed. Even in the middle of gunfire, he noticed. She wasn't hysterical. She wasn't screaming. She was steady. Another shot rang out from below. Then silence. Heavy. Uncertain. Min-jae's earpiece crackled. Perimeter secured. 2 intruders down. The rest fled. He didn't lower his weapon immediately. He waited. Counted. Assessed. Only when he was certain did he step back into the room fully. His gaze found Amara instantly. She looked up at him from where she knelt beside the injured guard. "I need a proper kit," she said, focused. "Now." He moved without hesitation, retrieving medical supplies from a secured cabinet. When he handed them to her, their fingers brushed briefly. Electric. Real. Alive. For several minutes, the only sound in the room was her controlled breathing and the guard's strained exhale. When she finished stabilizing the wound, the guard was conscious and no longer bleeding heavily. "You'll live," she told him gently. The man nodded, eyes filled with gratitude, and something else. Respect. Not for her position. For her strength. As security escorted the wounded guard downstairs, the penthouse fell quiet again. The kind of quiet that comes after something irreversible. Min-jae stood across from her. "You should have been afraid," he said quietly. "I was," she replied. "But you stayed." She rose slowly to her feet. "So did you." The truth of that settled between them. He had every reason to send her away. To sever the weakness. To re-establish control. Instead, he stepped closer. "You saw what my world looks like," he said evenly. "It doesn't get softer." "I didn't ask it to," she answered. His jaw tightened. "They will try again. I know. And next time. I'll still be here." That wasn't defiance. It was decision. He studied her face, searching for hesitation. He found none. "You don't understand what loving a man like me costs," he said finally. She didn't look away. "Then don't ask me to pay it alone." The word struck deeper than any bullet. For years, he had carried everything alone. Power. Violence. Loss. Control. He had convinced himself that isolation was strength. But standing in front of him was proof that strength could look different. Could feel different. He stepped into her space fully now. Not as the Reaper. Not as a mafia boss protecting leverage. As a man. "If I choose you," he said quietly, "there is no halfway." She swallowed, but her voice remained steady. "I don't do halfway." For a moment, the world outside the penthouse ceased to exist. No rivals. No territory. No legacy. Just breath and proximity. He lifted his hand slowly, this time not to command. But to touch. His fingers brushed her cheek gently, almost as if confirming she was real. She didn't flinch. Didn't retreat. The tension that had been building since 6:47 a.m. that first morning finally broke, not in chaos, but in clarity. "I thought love was impossible," he admitted softly. She smiled. That same warm, dangerous smile. Maybe it just needed permission. He exhaled, something uncoiling inside his chest that had been locked tight for 5 years. Downstairs, his security chief entered cautiously. "Sir, Dae-hoon has sent a message." Min-jae didn't look away from Amara. "Put it through." The message displayed on the screen behind them. "We miscalculated." Min-jae's lips curved slightly, not in arrogance, but certainty. "Yes," he said quietly. "They did." He turned back to her. From this moment forward, the narrative would change. Not because he had grown weaker, but because he had chosen differently. In the weeks that followed, the underworld shifted. Dae-hoon retreated strategically, unwilling to provoke open war without advantage. Min-jae tightened alliances, restructured defenses, and publicly, calculatedly, kept Amara visible. Not as leverage, but as inevitability. The rumors spread quickly across Seoul's underground networks. The feared Korean Mafia boss had not fallen. He had evolved. And the woman beside him was not weakness. She was the only person who had ever looked at him and seen more than a weapon. One quiet evening, weeks later, they stood again in the kitchen at 6:47 a.m. The marble still cold. The city still waking. Amara hummed softly. This time, he didn't stop her. He stepped closer behind her. "You're smiling again," he murmured. She glanced over her shoulder. "So are you." He didn't deny it. Because the most dangerous thing in Seoul was no longer Kang Min-jae's empire. It was the fact that the Korean Mafia boss who thought love was impossible had finally chosen it. And anyone who mistook that choice for weakness would learn very quickly that loving her didn't make him softer. It made him unstoppable. If this Afro-Korean romance story kept your heart racing and your emotions on edge, don't stop here. Like this video if you believe love can heal even the coldest mafia boss. Comment below, should Kang Min-jae leave the underworld completely for Amara, or can love survive inside Seoul's dark empire? And if you love powerful Afro-Korean romance stories, billionaire love stories, Korean mafia boss romance, healing love narratives, and emotional interracial romance, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next unforgettable story. Your support keeps these stories alive.